And welcome to IL MathCom. I am Heather Brown. I am an ISBE math content specialist through ISU. Janine Shepard is my co-host today, as always, and we're very excited today to be including Cheryl Beasley for our second in a row IL MathCom, where she's going to share some information about middle school small group instruction. So I'm so excited to be able to hear this information. So Cheryl, I'll let you go ahead and take it from there.
All right, thank you so much. Hope you can hear me all right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So let's see. All right, let me know when it pops up.
Looks good, Cheryl.
Oh, okay, good. All right. I wasn't sure if you saw it. Thanks. All right, so just a little background about me. I taught middle school math, grades 6 and 7, for 6 years, and I just learned a lot. The last 3 years I was a math differentiation specialist, which means I got to support teachers, go into their room and help them get small and differentiation started. But I learned so much, and that's really what I want to share with you today. Just some ideas. I want to validate what you're already doing, and then I just want to add some ideas for how do we meet with small groups of students once in a while to meet their needs and to give them exactly what they need in a middle school classroom where you might only have 46 minutes. Some middle schools are lucky enough to have a double block of math. I know a lot of districts are starting to move to that, but if you don't, it's hard to meet with students in that small amount of time with all the content. But for today, we're just going to talk about the need for small group instruction. And really, it's just getting a small group of students together, again, to deliver what they need. And as teachers do this, they've told me it feels like I'm tutoring because you can answer questions, you can catch them up and fill in any prerequisites that they need. You can offer extensions. So there's a need to meet with our students. I know I saw 135 sixth graders when I was in the classroom. So there's a lot of needs and there's a lot of different abilities. We'll talk about the goals of math workshops, how to group our students, different ways we can group our students, some organization, accountability, monitoring, how do we keep track of all of this? And I want to offer some resources and ideas that you can use tomorrow. All right, so in the middle school classroom, it might look like, traditionally, it might look like this, where we go over the last night's homework, we practice new problems, the students solve problems just like the ones that we did, and then there's typically a worksheet. And that's traditional, and sometimes that's what we have to default to. We have content we have to cover, but we want to prepare our students for the future. So we want complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, reasoning, and ideation. So all of these things we want to offer to our students, and sometimes that happens best when we're in a smaller group instead of whole group. In these small groups, we can offer and then while students are with us, the other students can be engaged with workshops that, again, offer that problem solving, productive struggle. I'm not there to help them. They have to figure it out on their own, which I know can sometimes be tough to motivate our middle school students, but we're going to look at ways to engage them through workshops. So what is a math workshop? Often our class time can start with a warm-up or a number sense routine. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and teach a whole group lesson, introduce a new topic. What else? just offer information that every student needs to hear. But then the true differentiation can happen when the students are in a small group and working with the teacher. When we teach whole group, we offer examples that might, you know, appeal to kinds of students. Ask that higher level question for some of my students that need higher level. I might ask a question that appeals to students who need some of those prerequisites. But when we meet in small group, we can offer it to them in small group instruction. And then we have learning workshops. So these are things that can take place independently or collaboratively. And again, we just want students engaged. I want them to be busy working so that I can meet the needs of my small groups. And we also want students to have some ownership, especially at this age at the middle school. I want them to feel like they have choice and that they have ownership of their own learning. So I do have a little YouTube video. I'm not going to show it, but it's here in the PowerPoint. The video is about 2.5 minutes, but it just gives some nice pictures of different classroom settings in middle school and how these students look in small groups. While some students are working with the teacher, other students are doing some investigative learning. There might be manipulatives, hands-on. So yeah, so that's just a nice short video to show what that looks like. When we do meet in small groups, our students can't hide. So I can really find out what they're thinking, what they're struggling with. All right, and so when we're implementing a small group workshop model at the middle school level, all the things that you do in the classroom still have to happen. Like students still need to get information, they still need to practice, and they still need to have that application piece. But it kind of all happens at the same time. And that's where we have to be willing to take a risk and try it out and allow students to have that ownership. Excuse me. Start small. You know, implement 1 or 2 pieces of this at a time, a workshop at a time. Find a friend who's also interested in doing math workshops and work together and kind of have fun and let go of some of that control and give the students ownership. There's some of you type A teachers out there, I know who you are, but we gotta jump in the deep end every once in a while. So give students ownership. Possible format to meet in small groups of students and meet individual needs. We have to pre-assess, right? There's usually 3 groups of students that make their way into our classroom. So group A, I would call them my group A, they're meeting standards. They're right where they need to be. And that's the majority of our students, hopefully. 80% need the lesson and they need the practice. And what you have planned is perfect for them. We have group B, students who are approaching the standards, so they might not be there yet. So they need the lesson. They also need some scaffolding and additional examples, maybe some hands-on and practicing with you one-on-one or in a small group. And then we have a group of students that are beyond the lesson and practice and they need deeper or more application. But I know I was always kind of like a deer in headlights, like, oh, I didn't plan for a student already knowing how to do the material I'm about to teach. And I know this happens a lot in the beginning of the year, for sure. Now that we're into January, I would think a lot of the content is newer for them. But definitely in the beginning of the year, we have some students that might know some of our content already. So how do we plan for small group instruction and differentiation that's needed? Like I said, I like to make groups, and I'll do that with a Post-it note pre-assessment. So in the past, I'd give a pre-assessment that covered an entire chapter or unit, and it gave me a broad brushstroke of where my students are at. But sometimes I needed more. I needed more information. I needed to be informed and keep my groups flexible. So on a Post-it note, as soon as they walk in, they would answer these 4 questions. So I'd keep the answers simple, and I'd have a question that's approaching the standard, 2 questions at grade level or right on target with my lesson that day, and then 1 that's a little bit higher. And so when I had these questions, students would fill them out and put them on my whiteboard, and then I would start sorting my groups because I'm already planned for having these 3 groups that are going to make their way. And it was an easy sort, and I did it right on the spot. Some teachers like to do it as an exit ticket and sort at a later time or have a little bit more time in between, so they would do it at the end of class for the next day. But what's nice about this is it really keeps the groups flexible. I wanted to show you an example of what you might get. So the final answer, or the answers for this pre-assessment, were true, false, and you can see that that bottom student had it all correct. And then these are the kinds of answers I received from other students. But I guess I'd like to ask the audience, what do you think about the Post-it note pre-assessment? Would you do as a warm-up or an exit ticket?
I like the Post-it note idea. It's quick and simple, and it'll be right there for you. It doesn't take that much time for the kids to be able to just put it there for you.
Good. Yes, right. I'd give the chapter pre-assessments, and it would take a long time. My students would be frustrated because they don't know a lot of the answers. It just took a lot of time, and this was quick and simple. Thank you. So that's an idea. And then we just have to be planned for it. Okay. I have a couple shout outs to how much time do you have for math? Because it'd be nice to know how long are your periods.
I have 57 minutes.
That's good.
I have 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 47.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. And that's.
And in the chat window, we have a couple people who said they have 80 minutes on one day and 40 minutes on the other, 60, 82, 80, 42, 80, 80-minute blocks. Wow, those are some differing answers.
Yeah. Yay for you, they have double block. We need it in math. All right, well, I wanted to give an example of a 45-minute period because I feel like that's probably the majority of us. So I'd take about the first 7 minutes to do a warm-up, an entrance ticket, or a number talk. Then I would take another 7 minutes to do the Post-it note pre-assessment. Like, I want to keep it 5 to 7 minutes. And then I take about 15 minutes to do a lesson whole group. So, delivering your content and what you need to teach, showing practice problems, having them work through some problems as a whole group. And then the last 15 minutes I would save for workshop time. So this is the last 15 minutes that would probably normally take place anyway. Students are practicing their seat work. But at that point too, I would pull a group of students to meet with the teacher and to know that it's okay if you only meet with one group a day. Depending on your time constraints, you probably can't see all 28 of your 7th graders. So once in a while, meeting in a small group is just going to inform your instruction that much more. So pull one group, and if students finish their practice work and they've met with you, they're welcome to move to a workshop or station once that work is complete. And I'm definitely going to talk about a little bit more about what that looks like. Another possible plan, we would just do the pre-assessment, a number talk, and then students would move right to workshops or seat work. Excuse me. And so the lesson portion happens in the small group. So roughly like 10 minutes with 3 groups of students. That's another way I've seen guided math or math workshops at middle school work. And student workshops and independent practice at their own pace. I can't, rotate every 10 minutes. Sometimes I needed a short amount of time with students, and sometimes I needed a lot more time with students. All right, so in your handout, there's a lesson plan template for 7th grade. So I have the standard listed and then an I can statement. And again, this template you can edit, but I just wanted to show you kind of everything that's happening. So here's my post-it note pre-assessment for this topic. I would do a number talk, just a review of some fraction sense for solving mentally. And then we're getting into the small group instruction. So I like to meet with students who are exceeding the standards first. They probably don't need much help on the practice work, and I want to offer them an extension of the lesson. Then my next group of students I might meet with are students that are right at the standards. That could look like a group of 10 if you have a room or a place to meet with up to 10 of them, or 5 in one group and 5 in another. And at this point, they've had some time to work on that practice work. So I just call them over and say, hey, do you have any questions? Can we do a couple together? And meet with them. And then lastly, I can meet with students approaching the standard. So students that might need more time with me. Those students too, I would have them start at the workshops. And then when it's time to meet with me, I'd say, okay, grab your practice work and come meet with me in the back. And we'll get started together. Some of them might not be able to get started without my help. So that's why I start them at the workshops, let them get some of their energy out, and then grab your practice work and let's do it together, at least to get started.
Cheryl, while you're transitioning, people are having kind of a side conversation, which you're welcome to join in, is does anyone have resources for number sense routines or number talks that are at the middle school level? And the response has been ilteachandtalk.org, which is that you worked on that project, as well as Dana Cartier is on the phone as well. So we've done that project, ilteachandtalk.org. And other people, Carrie Neary mentioned the UCubed website, which we also reference that frequently. So feel free to use those resources. Cheryl, do you have anything to add? Or if anyone else does, feel free to join the conversation.
Sure. I'm a big advocate of number talks. And really, it's just about building that number sense. It should be a short routine, but it's mental math. And we want students solving multiplication problems, division problems, just filling in those prerequisites. But again, doing it mentally and then sharing their strategies. That's the main goal. But even like 12 times 25, we just want students mentally doing computation problems. You could throw in percents too, like what's 6% of 250? That's a good problem. It works out to be a whole number, so we allow students to solve that any way that they want, but without that traditional algorithm. Like really think about what's 6% of 250? And I'll ask my audience, what is 6% of 250? Without paper, pencil. Answers?
I have an answer.
Yes?
I think it's 15.
I think you're right. Tell me how you solved it.
I did 6% of 100 is 6, and 6% of another 100 is 6, and then 6% of the 50 would be half of that. So I had 6 plus 6 plus 3.
Right? Perfect. And that's exactly how we'd want a student to solve it.
Okay, yeah, and I did 1% of 250 was 2.5, and then multiplied that by 6.
Perfect. Yep, that'll work. I love it. So that would be a number talk. So in terms of resources, it depends on where your students' needs are. But think simple. Make the numbers friendly. Like I said, 12 times 25. 140 divided by 3. Something like that. Does that work? I hope so. Okay. So again, here's that chart of like who, everyone always asks me, you know, who's doing what, when, and where are they? So for my math workshop, my students not meeting the standards start at the workshops and a workshop of their choice. Students meeting the standards, they just had the lesson, now they're at the seat work practicing. Students who need more of a challenge are exceeding the standards. So like one example of going above and beyond, I took a picture of the gas prices, $2.69 a gallon, and then 9/10. And I asked them, what does that 9/10 represent? And we had a good conversation about that. So bringing in the real world, a little Dan Meyer-esque, but just bringing in the real world and posing a question or a problem and letting them solve it, taking your content deeper.
And people are adding more suggestions besides Dan Myers, the Would You Rather, or Steve Waborny's resources. So if Sahar, Tracy want to give more explanation of those, feel free to unmute yourself and explain what they are more.
Those are all great. All right. Well, yeah, definitely check out those websites.
Proceed about 1 mile to Orange Avenue. Slow traffic.
How do I get taken out?
All right.
All right. I think, Cheryl, you can keep going then. Thanks.
I know it can be scary to get started. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. I just wanted to talk about the Would You Rather. I use it a lot. They have really good different situations. So, for example, one of the questions would be, would you rather buy 3 items and get 1 free, or buy 4 items at 20% off? So the kids, you know, for something like that, there wouldn't be a wrong answer, depending on how they take the situation, which a lot of the kids feel more comfortable about talking about why they chose their answer.
Yeah, for sure.
So I like using that because I feel that a lot of them don't want to be pinpointed as, oh, that's the wrong answer. This way they can explain why they think their answer is correct. And then other kids come up with their own ideas. So I really like to use that one.
Mm-hmm.
Great resource, thank you. And just that discourse and listening to how they think about the mathematics. I mean, formative assessment all day long. You can see where they're at and what they know and what they can apply. Good, thank you. All right, so here's the hard part, is keeping track of those workshops happening, your practice work, all of that. Like I said, I saw 135 sixth graders. I went to a workshop about differentiation and they said to do a tic-tac-toe activity. And I thought, all right, I'm gonna do this. So I was doing fractions and I had them create a fraction quiz. They had to choose 3 of the 9 for the tic-tac-toe, right? Create a fraction quiz. I had recipes. They had to add the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients. So they did that. And I met with small groups. And at the end of the day, my classroom was trashed. I was exhausted. And all my students turned in 3 pieces of paper each. And I said, I'm never differentiating again. It's not going to happen. So I had to get smart about how to keep track of everything. So I had to move away from worksheets, right? So looking at workshops was a lot more friendly. And then I created a math pass. So when I did meet with my students in small groups, I'd say, hey, let me check your math pass. And they would show me the work that they've done for blocks and stairs. And if it was all correct, I would sign it. And then that's what I would essentially use for a grade. I would sign it or hole punch it. But yeah, that helped. So I would use the math pass for the grade. And I'll definitely talk more about that. So what can our workshops look like? Again, you guys are doing this all the time. We just want them happening at the same time or available to our students while we're meeting in those small groups. So a short-term workshop is just solving a problem. I'm going to show lots of examples of that and engaging real-world problems. Long-term could be something investigative, some investigative research. I always bring in real-world, like menus, takeout menus, receipts, nutrition labels, different currency. I shop at Kohl's all the time, and for that receipt, it shows how much you saved. And often I would save more than I spent, so I would save over 100%, so they'd have to figure that out. And I would just tape it to my whiteboard and let them use the whiteboard to solve the problem. You could do grocery receipts, just don't do your Friday night grocery receipt, make sure it's appropriate. But have them find out percentages, tax, coupons, all that good stuff. Hands-on, using manipulatives, technology we have in our classroom. Fluency, I know, like we still have our middle school students that struggle with their, which makes fraction that really hard. So let them play games. I don't know, I always had a mystery item on my math pass, which meant I didn't know what I was going to put in there, so it gave me some wiggle room. But once you model like the Dan Meyer 3-act math tasks, that could be one of your workshops. And then like our middle schoolers are so creative, let them create a math center or a game, anything along those. We want them engaged so I can work with my small groups of students. All right. So just talking about your classroom space, I use my whiteboard, my bulletin board. I had to cut down on those worksheets. So really think like a poster and then the problem, and then they record their answers in a math journal that they can show you, and then you check it off on their math pass. So here's a Dunkin' Donuts workshop. This is a short center is done. But it says here, given the picture, what are some different hot chocolate options? So you could have a blueberry salted caramel hot chocolate if you wanted, but our students will look and find the different combinations. And because it's Dunkin' Donuts, they all say, oh, I want to do the Dunkin' Donuts workshop. I'm like, have at it. Go for it. Anything novel. I went to Wendy's, and this is the bag I got, and I thought how appropriate for me. But it says here, we figured out that there are 250 ways to personalize a Wendy's hamburger. Luckily, someone was paying attention in math class. So I asked my students, is this correct? And we use permutations and combinations to figure it out. And it is correct. There's 8 ingredients you can put on a hamburger. And the 256 was correct. Pattern blocks and fractions kind of go hand in hand. So you use the pattern block to create a picture worth 10.5 if the trapezoid is equal to a hole. Write an equation to prove your picture. So things like that. Again, I see a poster, a pile of pattern blocks, and they get to work. And I'm not collecting a ton of worksheets. If you have capabilities to take a picture, they can take a picture of their pattern blocks, and then write the equation to prove it. Other novel ideas, like how long will $1 million lined up end-to-end measure? So again, I'm going to try to show this. My workshop is just in a up here, and I would give them $10 to get started, so real money. They would freak out. But I'd give them $10 to get started, and then they'd have to use conversions to figure out how much or how long $1 million lined up end to end would measure. And I leave the question really open-ended. I don't tell them if it's end to end this way or this way. I don't give a unit of measure, but we're hoping for miles. That would make the most sense. But again, let them just explore. I use phone books sometimes, and I have them find a phone number whose total is 60, and they have to use parentheses in order of operations to make it equal 60. Or find a phone number that will have an odd sum, so they have to know rules. Again, just getting creative. I had a pasta workshop, so I had colored pasta. What's the ratio of the colored, that should say pastas. Lasagna noodles, you can write on them with a Sharpie, and I have them in equivalent expressions. Anything that's going to engage my students so that I can work in small groups. I don't know, any comments about some of these that you use?
A couple questions rather than giving additional questions. Carol and Michelle said, are you grading these? Becky said, how long to plan out?
Sure. So the grade kind of comes from that math pass. When I get to pull them into the small group, I check their workshops, and that's usually done in a math journal, and they show me their work that they did, and if it's correct, I sign off on it. And if it's not, I'll tell them, you know, you got to keep working. That's not the right answer. But for me, my math pass was like worth 15 points. It's up to you how you want to grade it. You can give 2 points for each, 5 points for each workshop that they complete. But it was a grade just for some accountability. And then planning them, I always hope that my math pass would last me a month, because by the time the students in our classroom do the warm-up, the post-it note pre-assessment, a number talk, a lesson, their seat work, they meet with me, it's only leaving like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes at the end of the period to work on these. So they might get started on a workshop and then have to the next day continue on it. So yeah, so I hope they last a month, so I'm not changing them out every week. We do have some choice boards at Math Teachers in Action, and these work nicely too. Maybe a workshop could be to complete 3 tasks from the choice board. And again, we love giving student choice, and they feel like they have ownership of what they're working on. And if you have the PowerPoint, all the links are in here, and it'll get you right to where you need to go. Some of my students needed even more than that, just the workshops. I had students, I would call them, not to their face, I call them my black holes, because they would just eat up everything I give them. So I needed more. So after they were done with their math pass, then they would have an ongoing investigation. And so I had a group of boys that were into earthquakes. So every day they'd come into the room, and when they had a chance to work on workshops, they would graph and display data of earthquakes happening close to us. So they would go to that USGS website, and there's a lot of activity right here in the New Madrid Fault, and they just found that interesting. And from this, then they started looking at different magnitudes of earthquakes and seismic zones, and they kind of got into it, but I just had them graph and give me all the numerical data to display. Another interesting website is asteroids, or things that are approaching the Earth. And at the NASA website, it just shows every day there's different near Earth objects. And so again, I had students that were interested in that, and they would gather and collect this information and have to display it. So I'd call these investigative. Not all my students would do this, but some would. And that's okay, because we're differentiating for their different needs.
A couple people had some additional questions about those and suggestions about those. So this is kind of you, I think you've already answered. Do you have a goal of 1 day a week to start and then build up your library so you could do this daily? And then somebody talked about, rather than doing your homework passes, that they had teachers that made a menu of activities. So the appetizer activities are a few points, the main course might be worth more, and dessert is sometimes extra credit. Usually each level has 2 or 3, and then students are required to do 1 from appetizer, 1 from main course, and dessert is optional. So Kathy Huff shared that. So those are
Yeah, I love a menu, definitely. All of these are learning contracts for the student to take ownership of their own learning, work on these different activities so that you can meet with small groups, for sure. So in the handout too, as a math teacher, we have to be creative as well. So there's this book I got from my school book fair that's Every Minute on Earth. And here's a little excerpt from that book talking about pet food in America. So I might just give this factual information and then have my students write 3 questions that have a numerical answer. I might develop 3 questions and have them answer it. But again, this information here led some of my students to do more investigative research. So at the end of this information, it says design dogs are the newest trend. They include the Labradoodle and the Puggle. So I'd have students bring in pictures of their dogs, and if they designed a dog, what 2 breeds would they put together and why, and the characteristics and all of that. This might be extending it for my students that have already completed their practice work and the workshops. I still need to engage so I can help and work with students that need my attention and more time. And it kept them engaged. All right, so we had a middle school math curriculum coordinator lined up, and she's now assistant principal, but she got pulled away to a meeting that she couldn't get out of. So some of the inner questions that I had is, why is there a need to meet with small groups of students at the 6-8 level? And maybe I could ask my audience this question. I'm sure you guys have some answers for that. Why is there a need at middle school?
I find whenever my students start getting lost on something and needing more one-on-one, that I teach 6th grade, they definitely start pulling away and viewing themselves as being bad at math, and don't always seek out those solutions on their own to figure it out, where some one-on-one time, I think, helps them see that, oh, they really can learn that information.
Good. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. That's so common, especially at that middle school level. So that's why it's nice to meet with all of our students, so that they don't feel, no group feels singled out. Like today I'm meeting with this group, and the next day I'm meeting with this group. But yes, they're going to be more apt to ask questions small group than they would have whole group. Thanks, Chris. Yeah. Good.
The Gemini Maths department said the same reason you need it for elementary. It helps with intervention and it builds confidence. And Brenda says, there are so many levels within our room. It's much easier to help students and fix issues so much more quickly. Melissa responded, different ability levels, especially in my co-taught classroom.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yes, you guys are awesome.
From an equity vantage point too, like sometimes the quiet student that doesn't want to seek help gets looked over. So if we're meeting in small groups, then we're more able to identify them and address those misconceptions.
Yeah, definitely. Good. I should just interview you guys because these are great. Yeah. I guess I would like to ask the group, words of advice for getting started. Is there anyone who's doing this and they found success? Or they might want to talk about pitfalls to watch out for as we get started.
Jeanette responded, quieter students will also feel more comfortable asking questions that they might be too scared to ask in a larger group as well. I think that's similar to what Janine said. That was more an answer to your first one. Becky says her advice is to start small.
Good. I agree. One group, a couple kids a day. We just want to talk to them about their math experience and make sure we're meeting their needs. Another thing with these workshops, I want them to be easy to do. So either prerequisites, material that students have already experienced, but then the flip side of that too is we can foreshadow standards or topics that we might not get to prior to standardized testing, prior to IAR. So I would throw in some geometry or probability and statistics as workshops, just to expose students to some of those kinds of problems. I think I even had like a Park or IAR workshop, which was just practicing that.
Couple more things for advice. Brenda suggests you have to train your students for these activities and understand that it's going to take time to get them to understand what it should look like, sound like, etc. One of our groups suggested find a few good ones that can last a while and try a few small ones that can be changed out sooner, not to overwhelm yourself. Brenda also said, don't give it up if it doesn't work right away.
So yes, start small, but you have to train our students kind of like puppies, how to enter into the workshop, how to leave the workshop, how to do that, how to transition quietly, because we have, everyone's working. I have a limit of 4 students at a workshop at a time. Yeah, all of those things. And yes, you're probably going to fail the first time. Probably not going to go the way expected, but keep trying. It will. And if it was too much or too big, like pare it down, start small. Definitely. Oh, yes. All right. So I hope, yes.
One more question in the chat. Melissa asked, so the workshop is completed individually while you are working with a small group, or do they work in their groups?
Sure. So I kind of see this, there's like 3 areas of the classroom. There's students that I work with, and I call them over based on those Post-it notes. So I have the Post-it notes in front of me, and I'll call 3 or 4 students. We have students working at their desks. And then we have students that are working in the workshops. And if they're at a workshop, they can partner up or work with a group. But really, students are moving at their own rate and pace. So they can move in and out of seat workshops. Once in a while, I have to manage from my small group setting and say, hey, you've been at that workshop long enough. You need to move to another one. Like if it was technology or something. So there's some of that managing from the back table. Yeah. Good. All right, like I said, it's a short amount of time. But I hope that I just gave you some ideas and some things that you can use right away in your classroom. Yeah, that's about it. I don't know, anything, just reflections, anything that validated what you already do, or excited, an idea that you're excited to try.
So I appreciated the some of the resources, because I know that's my biggest thing. Principals pushing to get the doing guided math or the group thing into the junior high like the grade school does. And I'm just looking at it going, I have a basic textbook. It has nothing about group stations or anything. So I'm excited to look through a lot of the websites that were mentioned.
Oh, great, thanks. Yes, and just some ideas, like I said, being creative, breaking away from that worksheet, because I don't want to take it home and grade all that, but looking more at like a poster and then a problem to solve, manipulatives, takeout menus, all that stuff.
A couple of people have said, I appreciate it doesn't all have to be graded. I'll also try the math pass. I like the idea of workshops spanning a few days or weeks versus all having it completed in one period. I'll try the math pass. One question was, or it sounds like they're kind of saying it, so the workshop is completed individually while you are working with a small group, question mark, which it is, right?
Yep.
Or do they work in their group? And then, oh, I think, Janine, I'm reading them backwards. I think you already got that one. Jeanette said, I'm really excited to try a pass with a man journal idea. We do guided math classes and I give students a variety of games or tasks to do while they are not meeting with me, but I don't have a good way to track these work today, so the journal idea is great. I like to use real world math ideas. What does the seat work? Then Christy asked, what does the seat work look like? Does it result in homework?
Yeah, when I say seat work, that's just whatever you have your students practice normally. So out of the text, the worksheet, yeah, just your normal practice work.
Great.
Yeah.
Anything else, Cheryl?
No, thank you. You guys are an amazing audience today, and you had such great ideas to share. I think my email is available. If you have any questions or you need a resource, feel free to reach out, because I like to direct you to a resource if I have access to it, for sure.
Sounds good. Then we will thank you. I think it looks like we're going to give you a few minutes of your day back. I'm just going to go ahead before we stop, and I'm going to include all those links again if I can find them, or if Janine has them open, she can put them in there. Please take the time today to fill out the post survey. This really helps us make decisions about what topics to consider in the future. It also helps us collect impact to know, to be able to continue to offer this. So if we don't have people responding to our post surveys, we will not be able to continue offering great resources and inviting people like Cheryl to join us. If you enjoyed this one, hopefully you take the time to go check out some of the archived versions that you may have not seen in the past. So thanks again. Thanks so much to Cheryl. Everybody give a virtual clap if they can. And we will talk to you at our next one in February. Announcement still to come. Thank you. Bye-bye.